Winter in Sage Hollow had a way of swallowing sound. Snow blanketed the Wyoming valley so thick it felt like the world had been muffled, hushed into stillness. The wind rolled down from the high ridge, sharp enough to cut through wool, leather, and bone if you stayed out too long. The kind of cold that didn't forgive mistakes. Caleb Thorne trudged through knee-deep snow toward his old weather-beaten barn, his breath fogging in slow, heavy plumes. At 35, he carried the quiet heaviness of a man who'd lived through too many winters and too many losses. His broad shoulders were hunched against the storm, the brim of his hat rimmed in frost. Beside him, his 8-year-old nephew Owen Thorne hurried to keep up. Owen wasn't Caleb's by blood. Truly not since the accident took Caleb's sister and her husband 2 winters ago. But the boy had been left in Caleb's care, and in the months since, their grief had slowly grown into something steadier, almost like family. "Stay close," Caleb said, voice low but firm. Owen nodded, tightening the scarf around his small face. The barn squatted against the storm, leaning, half-buried, forgotten. No one had used it in years, not since the fire took Caleb's father, leaving only charred beams and memories best not touched. He still came to check it when storms rolled in, though no one knew why. Maybe habit, maybe ghosts. They were 10 steps from the doors when Caleb froze. "Did you hear that?" he murmured. Owen shook his head, but Caleb lifted a hand, signaling him to stay behind. There again, a soft bump, a rustle, the faintest shuffle of straw. Caleb's jaw tightened. Wolves sometimes took shelter in abandoned barns, or men up to worse. He stepped forward carefully, boots crunching ice. The wind pushed against the door as he pulled it open, hinges groaning like a dying thing. Cold air rushed out, colder than outside. Inside, darkness swallowed everything except a thin blade of gray light slicing through a broken wall plank. The smell hit first. Damp wood, old ash rust, snowdrift. Then Caleb saw movement. A tiny shape curled behind a stack of decayed hay. A child, a little girl, no more than 4, bundled in a torn dress, her cheeks raw from the cold. Her hair was tangled, her hands trembling around a short wooden handle, maybe once part of a broom, now held like a weapon. Caleb slowly knelt. The girl flinched violently, raising the stick higher. Her breathing came in tiny, fast gasps. Owen whispered, "Caleb, easy." Caleb murmured, "She's scared." He lifted both hands, palms open, showing he carried no threat. The girl's eyes darted from him to Owen, then back again, wide, terrified, full of memories no child her age should hold. When she spoke, it was barely a breath. "Don't hit me." Caleb felt something in his chest twist painfully. Then her voice cracked again, a whisper carved from pure fear. "Mama's dying outside." Owen gasped. Caleb didn't move. This wasn't a lost child. This wasn't a runaway. This was someone running from something. Caleb's voice softened. "I'm not gonna hurt you, sweetheart. I'm here to help. We'll find your mama." The stick lowered just an inch, but enough. Caleb crawled closer slowly, like approaching a spooked cult. When he was near, he took off his scarf and wrapped it gently around her small shoulders. She trembled but didn't pull away. "What's your name?" Caleb asked softly. She blinked, lips trembling. "Maisie," she whispered. He nodded. "Maisie, I'm going to get you warm, and then we'll go find your mama. You're safe with me." He lifted her carefully. She weighed almost nothing, far too little for a child her age. Maisie buried her face in his coat, and her tiny hands fisted the fabric. Darwin stood nearby, eyes wide, but he said nothing. He didn't need to. His face said enough. Caleb stepped back into the storm with Maisie in his arms. Snow lashed his face immediately, but he bent his body around the girl, shielding her as best he could. "Maisie," he said against the wind, "can you point where your mama is?" Her hand trembled weakly as she lifted it, pointing toward a thick stand of pines. Caleb's gut clenched. He followed the direction, scanning the snow. Their small footprints, staggering, double-backing, vanishing into drifts before reappearing ahead. Someone had been wandering while barely able to stand. They followed the trail through whipping wind and sinking snow. Maisie's breathing grew shallow against Caleb's chest. Suddenly, Caleb stopped. A shape lay slumped at the base of a pine tree laden with snow, half buried, unmoving. "Caleb," Owen whispered. Caleb hurried forward, dread filling his throat. A woman, curled on her side, arms wrapped protectively around herself. Her coat was thin, soaked through. Her hair clung to her face, lips turning blue. One sleeve had torn, exposing a raw, infected wound along her shoulder. Caleb dropped to his knees, lowering Maisie gently beside her. "Mama," Maisie cried, scrambling to grab the woman's cold hand. "Mama, wake up, please. I don't need food. Just wake up." Caleb checked her neck, a pulse weak but there. "She's alive," he murmured. That the woman, Leela Brenner, barely stirred, her head tilting toward her daughter's voice, but her eyes remained shut. Caleb didn't waste a heartbeat. He scooped her into his arms, light as a bundle of sticks, and stood. "Owen," he said, voice steady despite the storm's roar. "Take Maisie. Walk right behind me. Do not fall." Owen nodded, taking Maisie's trembling hand. Caleb began the long, brutal trek back to the cabin, carrying a stranger who had nearly died, and a child whose whisper had changed everything. The storm raged, but for the first time in years, Caleb felt something cutting through the cold, a purpose, a pull he couldn't name, something that felt like the beginning of a story he wasn't sure he deserved, but was suddenly and undeniably part of. The Thorn cabin came into view only when Caleb was nearly upon it. The storm so thick the world beyond a few yards blurred into white. The cabin's chimney exhaled a thin line of smoke. Thank God the fire was still burning. Caleb's arms trembled under Leela Brenner's weight, though he refused to shift her even a little. Her body was frighteningly light, as if winter had hollowed her out. Owen trudged close behind, half dragging, half guiding little Maisie. The girl stumbled often, exhaustion and fear making her legs wobble, but she clung to Owen's sleeve fiercely as if letting go meant losing her mother forever. Almost there. Caleb called back, voice steady despite the ache in his chest. Stay with me. He shoved the cabin door open with his shoulder, the hinges groaning. Warm air rushed out like a blessing, brushing his frozen face. He carried Lila straight to the bed nearest the hearth. Lowering her gently into the quilts, Maisie crawled up onto the mattress immediately, tiny fingers seeking her mother's. Caleb crouched beside the bed, brushing damp hair from the woman's forehead. Her skin was ice cold, breath shallow. Up close, the wound on her shoulder looked worse red, angry, swollen with infection that had been left too long. Owen, Caleb said quietly, blankets, and the kettle hurried. Owen ran, grabbing thick quilts from the chest and a ladle for hot water. Caleb peeled back Lila's soaked coat, grimacing at the sight of cracked skin and bruises beginning to darken along her arm. Not the kind caused by the storm. These were older, deeper, human. His throat tightened. Maisie pressed her cheek to Lila's ribs. Mama, wake up. Caleb placed a steady hand on her small back. She's breathing, sweetheart. She just needs warmth. And time is she gonna die? Maisie whispered. Not if I can help it. When Owen returned, Caleb dipped strips of cloth into the hot water and began carefully cleaning the wound. The moment the warm cloth touched her skin, Leela flinched, a soft cry escaping her lips. Her eyes fluttered but didn't open. Caleb mixed a poultice from a jar of crushed pine bark and Sajan old remedy passed down from his mother and pressed it gently onto the torn flesh. She's been walking with this injury for days, he said under his breath. God almighty. Maisie trembled violently beside him. Caleb wrapped her in another blanket and sat her by the fire while he finished bandaging her mother. When he was done, he sat back heavily, rubbing the tightness from his hands. The fire crackled softly, casting warm amber light across the room. Leela lay still, but her breathing steadied, alive, barely but alive. Owen approached the bed cautiously. Caleb, who is she? Caleb shook his head. I don't know, not yet. But he had suspicions. Nothing about this looked like a simple case of someone getting lost in the storm. The bruises, the terror in Maisie's voice, the wound that had been crudely stitched. Someone had hurt them badly. And someone might be looking for them. Hours passed. The storm raged against the cabin walls, but inside, the quiet settled deep. Caleb fed the fire, kept the kettle warm, and stayed close to the bed. Owen sat beside Maisie, reading softly from the only children's book in the house, the same one Caleb once read to his sister long ago. When Lila stirred for the first time, it was well into the night. Her eyes cracked open, unfocused and glazed with fever. She stared upward, blinking, confused. Then she flinched violently, struggling to sit up. Easy, Caleb said, moving to steady her without touching. You're safe. Safe. The word hung in the air like something unfamiliar. Lila's gaze darted around the room, wild and frightened, until it found Maisie curled beside her, small chest rising and falling. Emmels. Her voice was a rasp. She's right here, Caleb said softly. Warm-fed. She hasn't left your side. Relief washed across Lila's face, and with it came exhaustion so deep she sagged against the pillows. Her eyes fluttered shut again, but not from fear this time, from release. She's got a fever, Caleb murmured. But she's fighting. Maisie crawled closer, resting her head on her mother's uninjured side. Mama's strong, she whispered fiercely, as if daring the world to contradict her. Caleb felt something heavy rise in his chest at the sight. This tiny girl, starving, bruised, carried a kind of courage he recognized too well, the kind that grows in the dark by morning. The storm had calmed into a gentle drift. The cabin was warm, the air thick with the smell of broth simmering on the stove. Lila hadn't woken again, but her breathing was more even. Maisie sat in Caleb's oversized chair, wrapped in 2 blankets, watching Caleb with wide, quiet eyes. Are you a doctor? She asked suddenly. Caleb chuckled softly. No, sweetheart. Then how do you know how to fix people? He paused, ladle halfway to the bowl. I've seen enough hurt to learn, he said quietly. Maisie nodded, as if that made perfect sense. Owen joined her, handing her a carved wooden horse Caleb had made years ago. You can have it, he said shyly. Maisie held it like a treasure. Caleb watched them, something warm and painful blooming in his chest. Children shouldn't have to bond over shared fear, but here they were, building something fragile and hopeful from the ashes of their losses. He looked back at Leela. That he didn't know who she was, where she came from, what nightmares chased her. But one thing was suddenly clear as dawn breaking over the valley. Whatever had driven her into that storm was coming for her. And Caleb, Thorn, wasn't going to let it through his door. Not now. Not ever. The storm eased fully by the next morning, leaving Sage Hollow wrapped in a pale quiet that seemed almost peaceful compared to the night before. Frost still clung stubbornly to the windows, drawing delicate white veins across the glass, but inside, the Thorne cabin the fire kept a cold at bay. Caleb Thorne hadn't slept. He sat beside the bed where Lila Brenner lay, her breathing steadier now, though still shallow. Every so often she murmured in a fever dream voice half prayers. Half-Lees and Caleb would wipe her brow with a cool cloth. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry. He simply watched her chest rise and fall, grateful each time. On the hearth, Maisie slept curled into a tight little ball under Owen's blanket, her tiny hand gripping the wooden horse he'd given her. Owen himself sat beside her, fighting sleep with drooping eyelids, determined to keep watch like Caleb. You'd have to stay awake, Caleb murmured. Owen blinked hard. I know, but I want to. Maisie shouldn't wake up alone. Caleb looked at the boy skinny, still grieving, yet full of a quiet bravery most grown men lacked, and felt something warm stir inside him. You've become quite the big brother, he said softly. Owen didn't answer, but pride glinted faintly in his tired eyes. By noon, Lila stirred again. Her fingers twitched first, then her eyelids fluttered, lifting with visible struggle. Caleb leaned forward, bracing himself for fear at the same panic she'd shown in that forest. But this time was different. Her gaze drifted across the room slowly, confusion wrinkling her brow. The fire, the quilts, the wooden walls, the faint scent of broth and pine. Then her eyes found Maisie curled near the hearth, safe and warm. Something in Lila's whole body softened. Maisie, she whispered, voice hoarse. Caleb rose immediately. She's right there. She's been by your side all night. Lila swallowed, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. She tried to sit up, but pain flashed across her face and she gasped. Easy, Caleb said, steadying her by the arm knot. Touching the bandaged wound. Your hurt infection's lessening, but you're weak. She shut her eyes tightly, breathing through the pain. When she opened them again, she looked straight at him for the first time. Really looked at him. Saved us, she whispered. Caleb shook his head. Anyone would have done the same. Her gaze hardened, not in anger, but in truth. No, not anyone. Silence hung between them, deep and quiet. Lila's breathing eased slightly as she scanned the room again, her mind slowly piecing together where she was. Who are you? She asked softly. Caleb Thorne, and that's Owen, my nephew. Lila's eyes moved to the hearth where Owen sat protecting Maisie like a small sentinel. She watched him a long moment before turning back to Caleb. And where am I? My cabin, south edge of Sage Hollow. Lila's lips parted slightly. Sage Hollow. She breathed the name as though it were a distant memory, or a place she never thought she'd reach. You walked far? Caleb asked gently. Lila didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted again to her sleeping child. Then she whispered, almost afraid of the words, we ran. Caleb didn't push, though the heaviness in her voice told him everything he needed to know. To danger, threat, a past that hadn't finished chasing her. Someone had hurt her, and was still hunting her. As the afternoon light softened into gold, Maisie finally woke, rubbing sleepy eyes. The moment she saw her mother awake, she scrambled onto the bed with a cry. Mama! Mama! Lila caught her with her good arm, pulling her close. Tears streamed down her face, wetting Maisie's tangled hair. My little bird, she whispered. Mama's right here. Caleb stepped back, giving them space, but he couldn't help feeling the ache in his chest as he watched them cling to each other. Maisie sobbed into Lila's shoulder. I thought you were gone. I was so scared. Lila stroked her daughter's hair. I'm here, sweetheart, and we're safe now. Maisie looked up at Caleb. He saved you, Mama. Caleb did. A flicker of gratitude and something deeper passed through Lila's expression. Caleb cleared his throat. I'll get you both something warm to eat. Owen, keep them company. But before he stepped away, Lila's voice stopped him. Caleb. He turned. Thank you, she said softly. For saving her. For saving me. He nodded once. You're welcome. But inside, something shifted. Something he didn't want to name. Not yet. Later that evening, the fire cast long amber shadows across the cabin. Lila rested against a pile of soft quilts, her complexion slightly less pale. Maisie lay beside her, humming softly. Owen had fallen asleep on the floor with a book open across his chest. Caleb sat in his rocking chair, whittling a small piece of pine wood, something he often did when he needed to think. His hands moved, automatically carving smooth curves while his mind stayed on the woman in his bed. He didn't know her story, didn't know what she'd endured, didn't know who hurt her, but he knew one thing with certainty. Whoever had driven Lila Brenner into the storm had not finished, and if that man came looking, Caleb Thorne was ready. Not because he was fearless, not because he was righteous, but because when he looked at Lila and Maisie, broken, exhausted, clinging to each other, he saw something he thought he'd lost forever. A reason to stand, a reason to protect, a reason to fight. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight, the cabin was warm. Lives had been saved. And for the first time in a long time, Caleb felt something like purpose taking root in the ashes of his quiet life. By the next morning, Lila could sit up without crying out in pain. Caleb checked her wound again carefully, always giving it time to brace, and was relieved to see the angry red edges settling into something less ominous. "You're healing fast," he said gently. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes were fixed on the small window, watching frost melt along the glass. "Faster than I expected," she murmured. "We've never had much time to heal." Caleb paused at that. Those were not the words of someone running from illness or bad luck. Those were the words of someone running from a man. Owen was feeding the chickens outside, boots stomping in the snow. Maisie was seated at the table, drawing with charcoal, humming softly into her curls. Peaceful, too peaceful for the storm. Caleb sensed beneath Lila's fragile expression. He took a seat across from her. "You don't owe me anything," he began, "but if someone's still hunting you, I need to know." Her fingers tightened around the quilt. She swallowed hard, eyes lowering. "It's not someone," she whispered. "It's him." Caleb said nothing, just waited. Lila drew a shaky breath. "My husband." The words fell heavy, tightening the air. Caleb leaned back slowly, jaw clenching. "He did this to you?" She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her silence was answer enough. The wound, the terror on her face, the raw panic whenever a shadow moved too fast. Caleb's gut twisted, the scar hidden beneath her collar. The way Maisie flinched at Ray's voices, the bruises he'd seen when he cleaned her wounds. He'd suspected by hearing it. Lila continued, voice trembling like a twig in a windstorm. "His name is Darius Brenner, sheriff of Colts Crossing." Caleb froze. Sheriff, a lawman, a respected one, a dangerous one, the kind no one questioned. Lila saw the shift in his face. Her own expression tightened. "You understand now why we had to run?" Caleb did. A bruised woman fleeing a ranch hand was one thing, but a woman fleeing a sheriff, a man with deputies and influence, authority, that was something darker, something far harder to escape. Maisie looked up from her drawing then, her voice small but clear. "Papa's coming." Lila's face went bloodless. "Maisie, sweetheart, don't say that." "But he is," the little girl insisted softly. "He always finds us." Caleb inhaled sharply. "He's chased you before." Maisie nodded. "Twice," she whispered. "Mama said the last time was the last time. But I heard him yelling. He said we were his property." Caleb stood so suddenly his chair scraped across the floor. Lila winced. "Please don't be angry at her." "She didn't mean I'm not angry at her," Caleb said, voice low, steady as iron cooling in snow. "I'm angry at any man who would hunt his own family." He paced once, hands on his hips, jaw tight. "This changed everything, a sheriff. We could put up wanted posters without proof. Could claim his wife was missing, unwell, or stolen. Could ride into town demanding men hand her over, and most would obey." Lila. He turned back to her. "Has he ever followed you this far north?" "No," she whispered. "But he's spreading out, searching wider. The last person who hid us said the sheriff had ridden through asking questions." Caleb felt the weight of those words settle like a stone in his chest. This wasn't over. It wasn't even close. Owen returned then, stomping snow from his boots. "There's tracks," he announced, fresh, out by the ridge. Caleb's head snapped up. "Human," Owen nodded. "Boot prints. Big, deep, maybe 2 sets." Lila's breath caught. Maisie crawled onto the bed beside her mother, clutching her arm. Caleb grabbed his coat, rifle, and hat. "Stay inside. Lock the door behind me." Lila reached out instinctively and caught his sleeve. "Caleb, don't go alone." He paused. Her hand was trembling against his arm. Her eyes, fearful, pleading, held him in place. "I won't let him hurt you," Caleb said quietly. "You don't understand," Lila whispered. "Darius is clever. He knows how to track, how to wait in the shadows, how to make people underestimate him." "I don't underestimate men who hurt women," Caleb replied. For a moment they just stared at each other, breath mingling in the cold air drifting from the window. Then Caleb gently freed his sleeve from her grasp. "I'm coming back," he promised. "No one touches this cabin while I'm still breathing." Owen grabbed his coat. "I'm coming too." "No," Caleb said sharply. Owen stiffened. But Caleb's voice softened. "I need you here, watching them. If I don't come back right away, you keep them hidden. Understand?" Owen swallowed hard, then nodded. Caleb opened the door. The cold bit into him like teeth. Snow glittered bright and unforgiving across the ridge. As he stepped outside, Lila whispered after him, "Please, come back." He didn't look back. Didn't dare. Because for the first time in years, he had something to lose. The tracks led Caleb into the tree store, the narrow ridge where snowfall thinned beneath the pines. The prints were indeed large, spaced far apart, belonging to a man who walked with long strides. A second set followed slightly behind. 2 riders, 2 hunters. Caleb crouched, tracing the edges of the tracks with gloved fingers. Men, armed, and heading straight toward his cabin. His stomach rolled. He followed the prints deeper until they vanished into the thick underbrush. He scanned the trees, senses razor sharp. Then something glinted, a scrap of black cloth snagged on a branch. Sheriff's uniform fabric. Cold traveled down Caleb's spine. Darius Brenner was close. Too close, and if Caleb didn't stop him in the woods, he would walk straight into the cabin where Lila and Maisie waited. Caleb tightened his grip on his rifle. One way or another, this ended today. Caleb Thorne moved like a shadow between the trees, silent, controlled, every step deliberate. The air was bitter, sharp enough to sting his lungs, but he barely felt it. All his senses locked onto the trail ahead. The scrap of black uniform. Cloth burned in his pocket. Sheriff Darius Brenner was here. In Caleb's woods, too close to Lila and Maisie. Snow muffled sound, but not enough to hide the distant crunch of boots. Caleb slowed, lowering himself behind a fallen pine. He peered through a veil of branches into the clearing beyond. Two men stood there. One tall, broad, hat low, coat black. The sheriff. The other a deputy, by the look of the badge glinting through frost paste, anxiously rubbing his hands. "We've searched half the valley," the deputy muttered. "Maybe the tracks weren't theirs." Darius Brenner didn't answer at first. He stood rigid, eyes sweeping the tree line with a predator's focus. His jaw was sharp, his expression stone cold. A man used to obedience. A man convinced the world belonged beneath his heel. Finally he spoke, voice calm and chilling. "She didn't die in that storm," he said. "I know her better than you. She's too stubborn for that." Caleb's stomach nodded at the cold certainty in the sheriff's tone. Lila hadn't been running from fear, she'd been running from ownership. The deputy shifted nervously. "Sheriff, even if she survived, this area is spread thin. What if?" Darius cut him off with a lazy, dangerous smile. "Oh, she survived. Lila always survives. But she doesn't stay hidden. Can't keep her mouth shut long enough." He took a slow step, boots sinking into the snow. "She has a habit of finding men willing to help her. Fools with savior complexes. Ranchers, farmhands, people who think she's worth something." He spat into the snow. The force behind it was pure contempt. Caleb's hand tightened around his rifle. "That's the trouble with giving a woman too much freedom," Darius went on. "She starts thinking she's a person." Caleb's pulse burned hot. He wanted to stand, wanted to walk into that clearing, wanted to drag the sheriff into the snow by his collar and show him exactly how wrong he was. But he forced himself to stay hidden. He needed information more than he needed vengeance. The deputy pointed at a set of faint tracks leading back toward the hollow. These prints small, child-sized. Darius crouched slowly, brushing snow aside. "Maisie," he murmured. Something twisted. Possessive flashed in his eyes. Caleb swallowed hard. This man wasn't looking for revenge. He wanted control. He wanted ownership. He wanted Lila and Maisie. Back under his thumb, Darius straightened, brushing off his gloves. "Let's move toward the ridge. If Lila found shelter, it'll be in one of the outlying homesteads." The deputy hesitated. "Granger's place is closest." Caleb's blood ran cold. Darius smirked. "Caleb Thorne, the quiet widower. I remember him." A pause. "The kind who'd taken a wounded bird." He stepped forward. "Let's go pay him a visit." The two men started through the trees. Caleb's cabin. Caleb slid back silently, heart pounding. He had minutes at best, maybe less. He took the long route home, weaving through brush, cutting across the frozen creek. Snow cracked under his boots, breath burning in his chest. The cabin came into view just as Owen cracked the door open, eyes wide with worry. "Caleb, close it," Caleb hissed, slipping inside. Owen shut it fast. Lila sat upright in bed, alarm bright in her fever-heavy eyes. Maisie gripped her mother's good hand tightly. Caleb didn't waste a second. "He's here," he said, Lila's face drained of life. No, he can't. He's tracking you," Caleb said, "and he's heading this way." Maisie whimpered softly, burying her face against Lila's side. Owen clenched his fists. "What do we do?" Caleb grabbed his rifle and checked the chamber, click-loaded. "We prepare," he said. "We stay calm, and we keep him out of this cabin." Lila swallowed, voice trembling. "You don't know him, Caleb? Darius doesn't walk away. He pushes, he takes, he destroys anyone in his way." Caleb turned to her, eyes steady and unshaken. "He hasn't met me yet." Lila shook her head, tears gathering. Please don't fight him. He'll kill you." Caleb stepped to her bedside, crouched so their eyes met. "Lila," he said quietly, firmly, "no man threatens a woman and child in my home." Her breath hitched. "Not again," Caleb added, voice cracking with something raw and buried. Lila's gaze softened, fear and trust colliding. The door rattled suddenly. 3 sharp knocks. Maisie cried out. Owen grabbed her shoulders protectively. Caleb stood, rifle in hand. He motioned for Owen to get Lila and Maisie behind the inner wall hidden. They obeyed fast, hearts pounding. The knocks came again, slow, deliberate. Caleb stepped to the door. "Caleb Thorne," Darius Brenner's voice thundered through the wood. "We'll open up." Caleb exhaled once, then opened the door. Cold wind swept in. Snow whirled around them, and on the porch stood Sheriff Darius Brenner, dark coat dusted in frost. arrogance carved across his face, a revolver at his hip. Behind him, the deputy scanned the cabin with guarded eyes. Darius smiled, a predator-bearing teeth. "Afternoon, Thorn," he drawled. "You've seen my wife." Caleb leaned one shoulder casually against the doorframe, rifle resting loose but ready in his hand. "No," Caleb said calmly. "Can't say I have." A dangerous pause. Darius tilted his head. "Well then," he murmured, stepping closer. "Mind if I take a look inside?" Caleb blocked the entrance with his body. "No," he said quietly. "I do mind." The sheriff's smile dropped. For the first time, Darius Brenner looked uncertain, dodging Caleb. Thorn felt the first crack in the man's confidence. This battle wasn't over, but it had finally begun. The air between the two men crackled like a storm waiting to break. Snow whirled around the porch, wind pushing sharp cold into the cabin doorway. Sheriff Darius Brenner stood tall in his black coat, his boots planted firmly in the snow, jaw set with a confidence only cruel men possessed. Caleb Thorn didn't move from the doorway. The rifle rested loosely in his grip. Not raised but visible, a warning without words. Darius' eyes flicked to it, then to Caleb, then to the quiet behind him. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said smoothly. "Just looking for my wife and daughter. They've gone missing. See, dangerous weather for a woman and a little girl." Caleb's expression didn't shift. "Storm's rough. Lots of things get lost in it." Darius' jaw twitched. His deputy stepped forward. "Sheriff, maybe we should check the barn." Or ask. Darius shot him a look that shut him up instantly. Then he leaned casually closer, fingers brushing the snow off his lapel. "You're a good man, Thorn," he said softly. "Always were quiet. Kept to yourself. A man like you doesn't want trouble." Caleb's eyes hardened, though his tone remained calm. "A man like me doesn't like threats on his porch." Darius' smile didn't reach his eyes. "No threat," Caleb promised. His gaze sharpened. "I just need to look inside. Quick." Searched to make sure Lila didn't wander in here by mistake. Behind Caleb, barely audible, a soft hiccup of fear escaped Maisie. Darius's eyes flicked upward at the sound. Too quick, too sharp. Caleb stepped fully into the doorway, blocking the view. "Wind plays tricks," Caleb said. "You'll hear all sorts of things." A tense beat passed. Then Darius pushed lightly against the wooden doorframe, testing Caleb's resolve. Step aside. Caleb didn't move. The silence dropped heavy as snow. Darius' nostrils flared slightly like a man holding in rage. Finally he stepped back, brushing frost off his gloves. "You hiding something?" he asked. "No." "You lying to me?" His voice grew lower. "Because I can smell a lie, Thorn. I've been sheriff long enough to know when someone's protecting something." Caleb's grip on the rifle tightened. "Nobody in this cabin belongs to you, including my wife." Caleb didn't blink. "Especially her." The deputy shifted uncomfortably, sensing the danger rise, and said, "Sheriff, maybe we should." Darius snapped. "Shut up." He stepped forward again, face inches from Caleb's. "You listen close," he growled. "Leela's mine. The law says so. The vow says so. Every man in 3 territories knows she's mine." Caleb's eyes darkened slow. "Dangerous, no?" he said quietly. "She's not." Darius' lips lifted in a cold, hateful smile. "You don't know her like I do." "I know fear," Caleb said. "I saw it in her eyes. And in Maisie's." Something flickered rich, pure and hot behind Darius' controlled expression. "You think you can keep them from me?" he spat. "You think some lonely widower can stand between me and my family?" Caleb didn't rise to the bait. "I don't need to stand between anything." "She chose to leave," Darius scoffed. "She tried that before." His voice dropped to a snarl. "You know what happens to a woman who tries to leave a husband? She loses everything. And a man who hurts his wife?" Caleb asked. "What happens to him?" Darius leaned in close, breath icy. "Nothing. That's the beauty of being sheriff." The deputy looked away, shame blooming across his features. Even he couldn't pretend anymore. Caleb's voice dropped, quiet but lethal. "You step inside this cabin, and that badge won't save you." Darius studied him long and hard. 2 men, both unflinching, one fueled by cruelty, the other by something far stronger. Finally the sheriff stepped back, brushing snow from his coat. His voice returned to a chilling calm. "I'll be back," he said. "With papers, with men, with authority. And you'll have to open that door." Caleb didn't answer. Darius smirked. "And when I take her and that girl, you'll regret choosing the wrong side." The threat slid into the cold air like a blade. He turned sharply, boots crunching as he descended the porch steps. The deputy followed, glancing back once with an apologetic grimace, then disappearing behind the sheriff. Caleb watched them until the trees swallowed their silhouettes. Only then did he close the door inside. The cabin was silent except for the crackling of the fire. Lila stood supported against the inner wall, her injured arm held close to her body. Her breath shook. Maisie clung to her leg, sobbing quietly. Owen hovered nearby, pale as snow. Caleb knelt to their level, voice calm though. His chest was a storm. "He's gone for now." Lila shook her head violently. "He'll come back." "You heard him." He always comes back. I know, Caleb said. Maisie whispered. He's never gonna stop. Mama? Lila bent and pressed her cheek to her daughter's hair, tears spilling. Silently, he won't touch you again, Caleb said firmly. Lila's head snapped up. Her eyes were wide, terrified. You don't understand. He'll bring deputies, judges, warrants. He'll twist the law any way he wants. Her voice broke. He always wins. Caleb reached out slowly, not touching her, just offering his presence. Not this time, Lila shuddered. Caleb, please, don't get yourself killed for us. I'm not dying today, he said, voice steady as an oak. But if he thinks he's dragging you back into that hell, he's got another thing coming. Silence thickened. Then Owen spoke, small but fierce. We'll protect you. Maisie sniffled. All of us. Caleb glanced at the three of them, his makeshift family broken, scared, but standing together. Yes, he said, all of us. Lila's eyes filled with something that wasn't quite hope but wasn't despair anymore either. Then we'll have to prepare, she whispered. Caleb nodded. Wool. He didn't know how. He didn't know what Darius would bring next up, but for the first time since the sheriff appeared, Lila looked like she believed they might survive, and Caleb Thorne swore still and unyielding he would not let that belief be broken. Not by a sheriff, not by a man like Darius Brenner, not by anyone. Night fell early over Sage Hollow, sinking the valley into a cold blue darkness that made every window glow like a beacon. Caleb Thorne spent the next hours preparing the cabin, not in a frantic panic, but with the quiet, methodical steadiness of a man who had survived storms far worse than snow and wind. He reinforced the doorframe with a second board, checked and cleaned the rifle, loaded ammunition into his vest pocket, stoked the fire until the room was wrapped in warmth through it all. Lila watched him from the bed, Maisie curled protectively against her side. Owen helped where he could, setting lanterns in the corners, gathering extra blankets, placing a pot of water on the stove for emergencies. It looked like a family preparing for a long winter night. Except the winter expected at their door wasn't nature, it was a man. Lila finally broke the silence. You don't have to do this. Caleb paused, turning toward her. Yes, I do. No, she whispered, shaking her head. He's dangerous. He doesn't stop. He doesn't get tired. Every time I ran, he found me. He has men who fear him, towns that respect him, and the law on his side. Caleb leaned against the table, arms crossed. A badge doesn't make a man untouchable, and it sure as hell doesn't make him right. Lila's voice cracked, but it gives him power. You saw how he talked, how sure he was. He'll come back with deputies, maybe more. He'll twist the truth. He'll call me delusional. He'll call you a kidnapper, and they'll believe him because they always do. Caleb didn't respond at first, not because he doubted, but because every word she said was true. Darius Brenner was not just a man. They were up against a sheriff who used the law as a weapon, a man whose charm painted his cruelty as devotion, a man who believed Lila and Maisie were possessions, not people. But Caleb Thorne had lived enough life to know something deeper. There were lines a man couldn't cross without answering for them, and Darius had crossed too many. He'll come at dawn, Lila whispered. He always does. He likes to see fear in the daylight. Caleb exhaled slowly. Then we'll be ready. Lila looked at him, not with hope, not yet, but with a soft disbelief that anyone would stand with them. Why? She asked. Why risk your life for us? You don't even know me. Caleb considered that. Considered her trembling hands, her bruised skin, the way she watched the door with the eyes of a hunted animal. I know enough. She held his gaze, searching. He continued, voice low. You're a woman who carried her daughter through a storm. You walked until your body gave out. You kept Maisie alive with nothing but instinct and grit. He stepped closer. I need your whole story to know you deserve safety. Her voice shook. Safety is something I've never had. Caleb gently touched the edge of her quilt, not her, just the fabric, giving her every chance to pull away. Then let this cabin be the first place you do. A tear slipped down her cheek, catching the light from the fire. Maisie stirred in her sleep, curling closer to her mother's warmth. Owen sat beside the hearth, chin on his knees, listening. Finally, Lila whispered, You remind me of the man I wanted my husband to be. Caleb's jaw tightened. Men like him don't change. I know. Her voice was almost a breath. That's why I left. He told me once that if I ever tried to run again, he'd come for Maisie first. He said she'd learn obedience the way I did. Caleb felt something inside him snap, a quiet, controlled break that reshaped into resolve. He's not touching her, he said. Lila's eyes shone with fear and something else. Trust. Fragile but real. She nodded slowly. Then we need a plan. Caleb pulled a chair close. Owen stood, anxious but determined. What do we do? The boy asked. Caleb thought for a long moment. We can't go on the offensive, not against the sheriff. But we can hold the line here until someone trustworthy hears the truth. Who? Lila asked. Sheriff Barnes from Three Pines. Caleb answered. He's honest. Once saved my father from a lynch mob. If we send word and keep Darius outside long enough, Barnes will come. But that town is 2 hours away, Lila whispered. You won't make it in time. Maybe not, Caleb said. but he'll come. Owen straightened. All right, I'm fast. I can do it before dawn. Caleb shook his head immediately. No, you're a child, and the trail is dangerous in the dark. Owen set his jaw stubbornly, exactly like Caleb used to at his age. Then at least, let me help defend the cabin. He will, Caleb said gently, but from inside. No one opens that door unless I say so. Owen nodded slowly. The planting as thread began to take shape. They barred the windows, set lanterns to reveal silhouettes outside, loaded a second rifle, prepared water, blankets and supplies. All the while the fire burned warm, cracked like a heartbeat, keeping them alive. As the cabin dimmed for the night, Leela spoke softly across the room. Caleb. He looked up. She held his gaze with a strength that surprised both of them. If we don't make it, she stopped, breath trembling. If anything happens, promise me you'll protect Maisie. Caleb crossed the room in 2 steady steps. He knelt beside the bed, eyes burning with quiet conviction. I will, with my life. Lila's breath caught. Her hand, hesitant and fragile, drifted from the quilt and landed atop his. It was the first time she'd touched him willingly then. I'm not afraid, she whispered. Caleb covered her hand gently with his own. Get some rest, he murmured. Tomorrow, we face him together. Lila eased back against the pillows, eyes softening as Maisie snuggled closer. Owen curled near the fire. Half-asleep.ai, half-asleep.ai. Caleb Thorne took the rocking chair beside the door. I folded and watched through the long, silent night. Ready, waiting, steeled, because at dawn, hell was coming up the road. Dawn crept across Sage Hollow like a hesitant breath, pale light brushing the snowbanks outside Caleb Thorne's cabin. Inside, the fire had burned low but steady. Caleb hadn't slept, not even a blink. He sat with his rifle across his knees, eyes locked on the frosted window. Lila dozed lightly on the bed. Maisie curled into her side. Owen lay wrapped in a blanket near the hearth, but his eyelids fluttered with restless dreams. The world was holding its breath, and Caleb felt the moment, the exact moment the peace broke. A distant crunch of hooves. One horse, then another, then several more. Leela's eyes snapped open. She clutched Maisie instinctively. Caleb stood slowly. It's time. Owen scrambled up, gripping his wooden toy like a talisman. Lila pushed herself upright, pain flashing through her shoulder, but determination stealing her eyes. The hooves stopped outside the cabin. Boots hit the ground. Then bang, bang, bang. 3 deliberate knocks rattled the door. Caleb inhaled slowly, grounding himself. Stay behind the wall, he told Lila. Owen, stay with him. Don't move. Owen nodded fiercely and pressed himself against Lila's side. Maisie whimpered, covering her ears. Caleb stepped to the door, rifle ready but pointed down on threatening, but firm. Darius Brenner's voice boomed from the other side, loud enough to shake dust from the rafters. Caleb Thorne, by order of Colts Crossing Law, I'm here to collect my wife and daughter. Open this door, or I'll break it down. Caleb cracked the door only enough to seek careful controlled. Outside stood Darius with 2 deputies behind him, rifle slung, expressions uneasy. The sheriff himself looked carved from a list, smiling like a man who believed the world bent to his will. Caleb kept his voice even. No one here belongs to you, Sheriff. Darius laughed, slow, cold, cruel. Funny thing to say when the law says otherwise. The law doesn't give you the right to hurt them, Caleb replied. Darius stepped closer, snow crunching under his boots. A husband has the right to discipline his wife. Every man in Wyoming knows that. Caleb's jaw tightened. Discipline isn't the same as torture. The sheriff's smile vanished. You've got my property, he growled, and I'll have her back. Caleb stepped fully into the doorway, blocking the opening entirely. You won't get past me. Something violent sparked in Darius' gaze. His hand drifted toward the revolver at his hip. Inside, Lila sucked in a sharp breath. Caleb heard it, but he didn't turn. He stood like a wall, a barrier, a promise. Darius spat into the snow. Move now. No. A pulse of rage rippled through the sheriff. He gestured sharply to his deputy. Search the cabin. The younger deputy shook his head nervously. Sheriff, this feels wrong. It's an order, Darius snapped. Man hesitated. Caleb raised his rifle, not at them, but skewered. I don't want bloodshed, he warned. But no one enters this cabin. Darius swung his revolver up and the world exploded. A gunshot cracked across the clearing. Then another. Caleb fired once into the air, forcing Darius to duck. Snow burst around them as the sheriff's bullet hit the porch rail. Inside the cabby, Maisie screamed. Lila covered her with her body, crying out at the jolt of pain in her wounded shoulder. Caleb shouted, "Stay back!" But Darius was done talking. He charged. Caleb swung the rifle up, blocking the sheriff's arm. The revolver fired wild into the snow. Caleb shoved him hard, sending him stumbling. The deputies froze, horrified. You're protecting a runaway wife over the law, Darius snarled, lunging again. I'm protecting a mother and child from a monster, Caleb growled back. They crashed into the snow, rolling, fists flying. Caleb's hat fell off. Snow stung his face. Darius swung wildly. Fury overpowering technique. Caleb fought like a man with something to lose. Darius fought like a man who believed he could not lose. In sight, Maisie sobbed. Lila watched the fight in terror, torn between pain and instinct. Reached under the bed, where Caleb had placed Owen's spare rifle loaded, meant only for bluffing. It would have to be enough. She staggered to her feet. Owen grabbed her arm. "No, Lila, you're hurt. I'm her mother," she whispered. "And Caleb's out there because of me." The storm of violence outside intensified. Darius slammed Caleb against the porch post. "She's mine." "No," Caleb shouted, pushing back. "She's herself." Caleb landed a punch that sent the sheriff reeling, and that's when Lila stepped outside. Her injured arm cradled, her face pale but resolute. She stood barefoot in the snow. "Darius," she said, voice shaking. "It's over." He froze, turned slowly toward her, twisted smile blooming. "Lila, you step inside that cabin right now, and I'll forgive you. You do as you're told, and I'll forget all this." Lila raised the empty rifle anyway, hands trembling.
"No," she
whispered. "I won't go back." Darius blinked, then laughed a hollow, cruel sound. "You think you can stop me with that?" "No," Lila said. Then she pointed at Caleb. "He can." Darius turned on. Caleb struck. One final blow. A crack echoed across the hollow as Darius crumpled into the snow, unconscious. Silence fell. The deputies stared, stunned. The younger one swallowed. "Sheriff or not, he deserved that." The older deputy nodded slowly. "We'll take him back to Colt's Crossing. There'll be an investigation. This ain't happening again." They dragged Darius away, not gently. Lila leaned heavily on the porch rail, shaking. Caleb ran to her, catching her before she fell. "You're hurt?" "I'm fine," she breathed, tears slipping freely. "You came back." "Of course I did," he whispered. Maisie ran out, flinging herself into Caleb's arms. "You saved Mama." Caleb lifted her easily, pressing his forehead to hers. "Both of you saved yourselves." Owen joined them, hugging. All three. It was a sight that warmed a freezing morning. Four people, battered but standing. A sheriff defeated. A nightmare ended. Lila looked up at Caleb, voice soft and trembling. "What now?" Caleb brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Now," he said, "you stay here as long as you want. Both of you." Lila swallowed. "And after that?" Caleb met her gaze steady, warm, hopeful. "After that," he murmured, "we build something new." Lila's fingers slid into his. Maisie rested her head against his chest. Owen beamed. The cabin behind them glowed with morning light, soft, golden, full of promise. For the first time in years, Lila Brenner wasn't running. She was home.